Ronaldo is the only player to score in 5 World Cups, and Messi is the only one to win the Best Player award twice. And these are just 2 of the 80 World Cup facts we'll see in this video. Starting with the fact number 1. Out of the 11 players who won the Golden Shoe as the top scorers of the tournament, 9 actually lost the World Cup they played. The Golden Shoe award started being given in 1982, when Italy's Paolo Rossi won it, and also won the title. But from then on, it became a streak of unlucky top scorers. In 1986, the Golden Shoe went to England's Gary Lineker, who lost the title. In 1990, it went to an Italian who also lost, and it kept going. The only exception was Ronaldo, the R9, who won it in 2002 and ended up becoming the biggest goal scorer with 15 World Cup goals in his career. But that takes us to fact number 2, cause R9 ended up being unlucky. He became the all-time top scorer just to be surpassed by Klose, who in that infamous 7-1 scored his 16th goal. But Klose might not hold that record for much longer. Kylian Mbappé has already scored 12 goals, only 4 more to tie with him. However, Mbappé already has a huge World Cup feat, the most goals ever scored in the final. He scored 1 goal in the 2018 final and 3 in 2022, being the only player to ever reach that number. He scored from outside the box against Croatia, leaving no chance for the keeper Subasic, and then in 2022 he scored a penalty, a half volley, and another penalty against Argentina. And the most impressive part is that he did it at just 24 years old, meaning he could extend his record even further in the future. Besides the goal he scored in the penalty shootout, but that one doesn't count. That final was so insane that another record was broken. The guy with the most World Cup matches played. The guy who held that record for years was the German legend Lothar Matthäus, who played 25 World Cup matches. It seemed impossible for anyone to surpass him. 25 matches is insane. But when Argentina reached the final, Messi played his 26th World Cup match. His first was against Serbia and Montenegro in 2006, and from 2010 onwards, he played in Argentina's every single World Cup match. We're gonna see many more facts, like the national team with the most losses in World Cup history, the player who scored the most goals in a single tournament, and much more. Now let's go to fact number 5. No team has ever won a World Cup with a foreign manager. Nowadays, many national teams have coaches from other countries, like Brazil with Ancelotti, England with Thomas Tuchel, Portugal that is managed by the Spanish Martinez, etc. But literally, every single team that lifted a trophy did it with a coach from their own nation. It was Argentina's Scaloni, France's Didier Deschamps, Germany's Löw, Spain's Del Bosque in 2010, and so on. And that takes us to fact number 6. Cause even though Del Bosque's team in 2010 looked incredible on paper, they won the title with literally the worst attack ever for a World Cup winner. They had Iniesta, Xavi, Busquets, David Villa, Torres, and so on. They were also the reigning UEFA Euro champions, so expectations were sky high, but their attack disappointed. In the very first match, Spain actually lost to Switzerland by 1-0. At least they went on to defeat Honduras 2-0 and Chile 2-1, but those were the matches where they scored the most goals. In the round of 16 against Portugal, it was just a 1-0 win, and in the quarterfinals against Paraguay, it was another narrow 1-0 victory, with the ball even hitting the post twice before going in. Then it came the semi-final, where they beat Germany 1-0 with a header from a corner, and in the final, regular time ended 0-0, and Spain only managed to score in extra time, finishing the tournament with only 8 goals scored. In that World Cup, 5 national teams scored more goals than Spain. To put that into perspective, Germany, who finished 3rd place, scored double that amount. But what really matters is a trophy. So, that 2010 World Cup was so crazy, it even have something that will probably never happen again. Diego Forlan won the Best Player award without even his team reaching the final. Usually, the Golden Ball winners are either champions or runners-up, but Forlan in 2010 won it, finishing in 4th place. Uruguay reached the semi-finals of the World Cup after defeating Ghana on penalties, but in the semi-finals they lost to the Netherlands and also lost to Germany in the 3rd place playoff. But still, Forlan became a legend. He was the captain of the Uruguayan national team and scored iconic goals, like a half volley against Germany and a long-range strike against the Netherlands, making his 6 goal contributions. So he became the Golden Ball of the worst ranked team ever. Forlan scored 5 goals in 7 matches, but there was a player who managed to score 11 goals in just 5 games. This is a player many people have never even heard of, but who achieved the impossible. That takes us to fact number 8. Back in 1954, a guy called Sandro Kocsis from Hungary started by scoring 3 goals in the first match against South Korea. But everyone saw he was gonna be a record breaker in the second match against Germany, where he scored 4 goals. And in that edition, there were only 2 group stage matches, going straight to the knockout stage starting from the quarterfinals. So in the quarterfinal against Brazil, he scored 2 more, and in the semifinal against Uruguay, another 2 goals. The only game he didn't score was in the final, ending that tournament with the highest goal average in history, 2.2 goals per game. Also finishing as the top scorer, far ahead of everyone else. But in the end, he left without the trophy, as runner-up. Actually, finishing as the top scorer can make our team lose a World Cup. We've seen how winning the Golden Shoe doesn't guarantee success, but this trend comes from the very first World Cup. Out of the 22 tournaments, only in 3 did the isolated top scorer also lift a trophy. In the other 19 World Cups, either the top scorer wasn't from the winning side, like Mbappé in 2022, or the top scorer was multiple players. Check it out, in the very first World Cup, the winner was Uruguay, but the top scorer was a guy from Argentina. And it continued. 1938, winner Italy, top scorer Leonidas from Brazil. 1950, winner Uruguay, top scorer Ademir from Brazil. 1954, winner Germany, top scorer Sandro Kocsis from Hungary. Not even Pelé, who won the 1970 World Cup as the standout player, managed to score the most goals. The top scorer was Gerd Müller from Germany. Only Mario Kempes, Paulo Rossi, and Ronaldo the R9 managed to be the sole top scorers and champions at the same time. 3 out of 22. These are things no one can really explain, but let's get into more mind-blowing facts, like the next one. Until 2026, Portugal played fewer World Cups than Chile. Nowadays, we're used to see Portugal qualify for every edition, but that wasn't always the case. From the first World Cup in 1930 until 1998, Portugal had only qualified twice. They declined to play in the first World Cup, then Portugal didn't qualify for 1934, 1938, 1950, 54, 58, and also failed to qualify for 1962. Then finally, in 1966, they made it there. But then they missed in 1970, 74, 78, 82, and only managed to play a World Cup again in 1986. 20 years after their first participation. But if you thought Portugal was back, they also failed to qualify for 1990, 1994 and 1998. Things were bad. But then in 2002 with Figo, they managed to get a spot, and from that moment on with Cristiano Ronaldo, they started qualifying for every tournament, playing in 2022 their 8th World Cup. Meanwhile, Chile has qualified 9 times. So only in 2026 will Portugal finally tie with Chile. But even playing just 8 World Cups, Portugal has managed to reach the semifinals twice. They won the bronze medal in '66 and finished 4th in 2006. And in terms of medals, the most successful national team ever is not Brazil, it's actually Germany. While Brazil is the team with the most trophies, Germany is the country that reached the most finals. Brazil has 5 titles and 2 silver medals, while Germany reached the final in 1954, 1966, 74, 82, 86, 1990, 2002 and 2014. 4 titles and 4 runner-up finishes. And even more, while Brazil has 2 bronze medals, Germany has 4. So in total, Brazil has 9 medals while Germany has 12. If Germany wins another World Cup, they'll officially be the most successful national team ever. But in 2022, it was a disaster, being eliminated in the group stage. And while 2022 was one of the worst World Cups for Germany, the host nation Qatar went down in history with a negative record, the worst host country performance ever. Usually when a country hosts a tournament, they often go far, like Russia that almost reached the semi-finals in 2018. But Qatar was the opposite. Right in the opening match, they lost 2-0 to Ecuador, being a huge disappointment, because that was supposed to be the easiest match. Then in the next match, they lost 3-1 to Senegal, and in the last game, 2-0 to the Netherlands. In their home, Qatar left the tournament with 3 defeats, just 1 goal scored, and 7 conceded, making it the worst ever World Cup campaign by a host nation. And speaking of home team humiliations, this brings us to fact number 13, the biggest thrashing suffered by a host nation. Conceding a heavy defeat is already humiliating, But doing it in front of your own fans is even worse, and that's exactly what Brazil saw in July 2014. This was supposed to be one of the greatest World Cup games in recent history. In the semi-final, Germany, full of stars, faced Brazil, the country with the most titles on their own soil. The game actually started competitively, with Brazil creating chances, but in just 11 minutes, Müller scored the opener. After that, Brazil completely fell apart, and from the 23rd minute, the humiliation began. Klose, Kroos, Toni Kroos again, and Khedira. By the 29th minute, Germany had scored their 5th goal. At that point, everyone already knew Germany was heading to the final, but in the second half, they scored 2 more. Then Brazil only managed to score 1 at the very end. By 7-1, Brazil suffered the biggest thrashing of a home team ever. But here's the catch. Do you know which country has conceded the most goals in World Cup history? Germany. Of all countries that have played in a World Cup, Germany is the one that suffered the most goals, 130. In 1954 and 1958, they conceded 14 goals in each tournament. Until 2022, when they were knocked out in the group stage, Germany conceded 5 goals in just 3 matches, being actually their worst defense in over 50 years. In 2022, Germany had an average of 1.6 goals conceded per game, which was their worst average since the 1970 World Cup. But if Germany is the team that conceded the most goals, at least they are not the team with the most losses. The country that has lost the most matches in World Cup history is actually Mexico, with a total of 28 defeats, while Germany has 23 defeats. But to be fair, Mexico only has so many losses because they've played in a lot of tournaments. The 2026 World Cup is actually their 18th appearance. That's 18 out of 23 tournaments. But if we look at which country has the most draws, it's not Mexico. It's actually England. Since their debut in the tournament, they have a total of 22 draws. If a draw means a boring game, England leads the way. Now, after the country with the most losses and the most draws, there's the country with the most wins, Brazil. And the numbers are so impressive that Brazil actually has more wins than England has in total games played. While England has played 74 matches, Brazil has won 76. In the 2002 World Cup, Brazil literally won every single match, remaining to this day the only team to win all their games in the modern format. 2-1 over Turkey, 4-0 over China, 5-2 over Costa Rica, then they defeated Belgium, England, Turkey again in the semi-final, and Germany in the final, making it 7 wins in 7 matches. Now, that 2002 World Cup was so iconic, it had another historic feat, the fastest goal ever. In the 3rd place playoff, Turkey faced South Korea, which is already pretty bizarre considering it was a match for the bronze medal. And as soon as the referee blew the whistle, it only took 11 seconds for the striker Hakan Şükür to score the opener. The South Korean defenders leapt, lost the ball, and the striker finished it. There wasn't even time to think, and South Korea was already 1-0 down. It was a mistake by the defender that ended up costing everything, cause Turkey beat South Korea 3-2, just 1 goal difference. And that World Cup ended with a total of 161 goals scored. But that's still far from being the tournament with the most goals. The one with the most goals ever was actually in 2022. Across 64 matches, 172 goals were scored, an average of 2.68 goals per game. But believe it or not, 2022 wasn't the most entertaining one. There was actually a World Cup with double that average. And that takes us to fact number 20. Back in 1954, hosted in Switzerland, the tournament was much smaller. Only 26 matches were played, less than half of 2022. But still, the number of goals was insane. 140 were scored. That's an average of over 5 goals per game. It was just insane. Hungary defeated South Korea 9-0, Uruguay beat Scotland 7-0, Germany beat Turkey 7-2, England tied with Belgium 4-4, and much more. Definitely wasn't a great World Cup for goalkeepers. And another goalkeeper who also wasn't that World Cup was the Mexican Antonio Carvajal, who also got thrashed. But this guy actually went down in history, cause he became the first player to appear in 5 World Cups. That's right, it's not just Messi and Ronaldo who hold that record. In fact, he set that record long before they were even born. He played his first World Cup in 1950 for Mexico at just 21 years old. Then he also played in 1954, 58, 62, and also in the 1966 World Cup. His record was only matched by Lothar Matthäus in 1998. For decades, he remained the only player to play in 5 World Cups. But if doing it as a player is already difficult, as a manager it's almost impossible. However, the Brazilian coach Pereira managed 5 different national teams across 6 World Cups, becoming the manager with the most tournaments ever. And his first World Cup was already with a very unusual country, Kuwait in 1982. Then in 1990 he went to his second World Cup, this time coaching the United Arab Emirates. Those were 2 smaller teams, but in 1994 he was the manager of none other than Brazil, where he won the World Cup. But after lifting the trophy, he decided to go back to manage smaller countries. So in 1998, as the reigning champion coach, he went to the tournament with Saudi Arabia, believe it or not. But things went badly. He lost the first 2 group stage matches and was fired before it even ended. And if that wasn't random enough, for the 2006 World Cup, he returned, this time coaching Brazil again. Yeah, he returned to Brazil's national team, but ended up eliminated in the quarterfinals against France. Everyone thought he was finished. But then, at 67 years old, Pereira went to the 2010 World Cup as South Africa's manager. His 6th World Cup with his 5th national team, where they were eliminated in the group stage. But he ended his World Cup career with a victory over France. Such a legend. And in 6 tournaments, Pereira won 1 title. Actually, literally every single World Cup winning manager lifted a trophy just once. No manager won it twice, except for one. And it's a guy you probably never even heard of, Vittorio Pozzo. His first World Cup was in 1934, when he managed Italy in the tournament hosted there and defeated Czechoslovakia in the final to win the title. Back then, Italy was a true powerhouse. Then in 1938 in France, he led Italy to yet another trophy, defeating Hungary in the final. It's crazy to think that his record hasn't been matched to this day. This guy literally has 2 titles in just 2 tournaments played. If it weren't for him, Italy would only have 2 stars on their badge. And that takes us to fact number 24, cause while Vittorio Pozzo has the most titles as a coach, Pelé has the most trophies as a player. But there is still one man who won even more titles than both of them, Mario Zagallo. Back in 1958 and 1962, Brazil won 2 consecutive titles with 2 different managers. But Zagallo was there both times, winning his first 2 titles. Then he retired as a player, became a manager, and led Brazil to win the 1970 World Cup, winning it for the 3rd time in his career. And as if that wasn't enough, in 1994, Zagallo went with Brazil to the World Cup as an assistant coach and won the title once more. Zagallo won twice as a player, once as a manager, and another time as an assistant coach, having the same number of trophies as Germany and Italy. But he went even further, and in 1998, as the main coach again, he led Brazil to the final, where they finished with a silver medal, a true legend. And Zagallo won his first World Cup in 1958. The same year, an impossible record was broken. Alongside Zagallo in that tournament was Pelé, who scored 6 goals in that World Cup. But he didn't even score half of the goals that another guy, called Just Fontaine, scored. This guy played for France at 25 years old, and in the very first group stage match, he scored a hat-trick, 3 goals right away. Then he scored 2 against Yugoslavia and another against Scotland, making it 6 goals in the group stage alone. Then in the quarterfinals, he scored 2 against Northern Ireland, and in the semifinals, France lost to Brazil, but Fontaine still scored in that match. By then, he already had 9 goals, still a long way to reach 13. But France went to the 3rd place playoff against Germany, and Just Fontaine scored not 1, not 2, but 4 goals, ending that World Cup with 13 goals, an average of 2.17 per game. With just 1 more World Cup, Just Fontaine could be to this day the all-time top scorer. But before the next World Cup could take place, he started having serious ankle injuries, which kept him out of the tournament, making 1958 the only one he ever played. To put it into perspective, in just 1 edition played, he still remains in the top 5 all-time top scorers alongside Messi. He even scored 2 hat-tricks in that tournament. But there's only one player in history who managed to score hat-tricks in 2 different tournaments, the Argentine Gabriel Batistuta. In 1994, he went to the World Cup with Argentina, and in the very first group stage match, he scored a hat-trick against Greece. he scored with a shot into the corner, then netted a stunner in the top corner, and finally converted a penalty. Then in the next edition in 1998, he once again went to the tournament, and against Jamaica, he repeated the feat. He struck one into the corner, then scored another very similar goal, and finally converted a penalty again. No one apart from him scored 2 hat-tricks in 2 different tournaments. Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, scored just 1 World Cup hat-trick. But this one from Ronaldo broke another record, the oldest player to score a hat-trick. In the 2018 World Cup group stage, Portugal faced Spain, and Ronaldo went to that game at 33 years and 4 months. But that age for Ronaldo is still the age to be at his peak. So in the 4th minute, he scored a penalty. Then in the 44th minute, he scored from outside the box with a goalkeeper error, and before the game ended, he scored a stunning free kick. 3 goals against Spain. It's almost impossible for any player to do that, being older than 33. And if he was the oldest, the youngest to score a hat-trick was Pelé. In the 1958 World Cup, in the semi-final against France, Pelé scored in the 52nd minute, 64th and 75th. All that at the age of just 17. A truly impossible record to break. That was the most goals Pelé ever scored in a single World Cup match, while the most goals Just Fontaine scored in one game was 4. But there was one player, just one in all of history, who scored 5 goals in a single match. And no, it wasn't R9, Mbappé, Klose or anyone like that. It was a guy many people don't even remember. Oleg Salenko. In the 1994 World Cup, Salenko was Russia's number 9, still unknown to most people. But in the group stage match between Russia and Cameroon, he made history. In the 15th minute, he received the ball and shot to score the opener, and then in the 41st minute, he scored another one. It seemed like a normal game, until the end of the first half, he scored another goal from a penalty, completing a hat-trick in just 45 minutes. And if that wasn't enough, in the 72nd minute, he scored again, and moments later, he completed the record, scoring the 5th goal. Crazy to think that no one ever matched this. But that game was so crazy that he had another record that will probably never be broken. The oldest player to score a goal. That takes us to fact number 30. While Russia had Salenko, Cameroon had the striker Roger Milla, who in the 46th minute fought for the ball inside the area and shot in the corner. It seemed like a normal goal, but the impressive part was his age at the time, 42 years old. He had already been playing for the Cameroon national team for 20 years, and in 1994 he had his last dance. This was actually his 5th World Cup goal. When he was already 38, he scored 4 goals in the previous World Cup, and then scored another in 1994. That's why he celebrated so much, even though the scoreline was 3-1 for Russia. In the end, both Russia and Cameroon were eliminated, so they took this photo to celebrate the moment. But even though Roger Milla was 42 years old, he's not the oldest to ever play a World Cup match. Several years later, in 2018, Egypt's keeper Essam El Hadzaoui played in a group stage match against Saudi Arabia at 45 years old. He had been playing for the Egyptian national team since 1996 and was a starter in the 1999 Confederations Cup. That year, his future teammate Salah was only 7 years old, literally just a kid, while El Hadzaoui was already in the national team. He went on playing for Egypt, but in 2018, that ended up being his only World Cup match in his entire career. To put it into perspective, El Hadzaoui is almost the same age as Zinedine Zidane. And on top of that, he even managed to save a penalty. But even with a penalty save, he still conceded 2 goals in that game, managing to keep a clean sheet for only 41 minutes. But there was another keeper who kept a clean sheet for much longer, an incredible 518 minutes. In the 1990 World Cup, Italy's keeper Walter Zenga went through the entire group stage without conceding. Then in the round of 16, they beat Uruguay 2-0, and in the quarterfinals, they eliminated Ireland by 1-0. Italy reached the semi-finals with a perfect clean sheet. So they faced Argentina, and even against a legendary player like Maradona, they finished the first half without conceding a goal. Until in the second half, Zenga was finally beaten. In the end, the match went to penalties and Italy was eliminated. But just imagine, he went over 8 hours of World Cup football without conceding a single goal. And speaking of goals, have you ever wondered who scored the first goal in World Cup history? Well, the very first match took place in July 1930 between France and Mexico. So in the 19th minute, the forward Lucien Laurent made history, scoring the first goal in the tournament. And if he scored the first goal, the 1000th goal was scored in 1978 by the Dutch forward Brink against Scotland. Meanwhile, the 2000th goal came in 2006 when the Swedish forward Elbeck scored against England. So the goal number 3000 is yet to be scored. Now, talking about goals, the next fact really blew my mind when I found out. If you add up all World Cups from 1930 to 2022, Italy, France and Argentina have the exact same goal difference. Let me explain. Goal difference is the difference between goals scored and goals conceded. And across history, Argentina scored 152 but conceded 101, making it a goal difference of plus 51. Then France scored 136 and conceded 85, also having a goal difference of plus 51. But if that's a bizarre coincidence, Italy scored 128 and conceded 77, making it plus 51 as well. Three national teams with the same goal difference. And if they have a goal difference of plus 51, the Netherlands has a historic goal difference of plus 44. They are not far behind. And the Netherlands is the best team that have never won the title. They came close to winning their first trophy in 1974 with Johan Cruyff, where they even eliminated the reigning champions Brazil and reached the final. But the Netherlands finished as runners-up, and that was just our first heartbreak. 4 years later, they reached the final again, this time losing to Argentina in extra time. That made 2 silver medals. Then in 2010, they reached the final again, only to lose once more. The Netherlands has reached 3 finals but has never won a title. On top of that, they also have a 3rd place finish. So in total, it's 4 World Cup medals. This almost seems unfair, cause England and Spain, 2 World Cup winners, have only 1 medal each. Spain has 1 title, but no runner-up and no 3rd place finish. Same for England. After winning it, they never reached the final again and not even got a bronze medal. To put it in perspective, Sweden has 3 World Cup medals and Hungary has 2 silver medals. Now, another team that has a medal is Turkey. In 2002, they managed to finish 3rd place, becoming one of the most surprising underdogs ever. In 2002, Turkey played in the World Cup after 48 years without showing up in the tournament. But in the first game, they started by losing to Brazil. At least they managed to win the other matches, qualifying 2nd place. Then in the round of 16, they beat the host Japan 1-0, and in the quarterfinals, they defeated Senegal, reaching the semifinals. The road to the semifinal had already been very different, but with a single goal from Ronaldo, Turkey was eliminated. However, their journey wasn't over. In the 3rd place playoff, Turkey defeated South Korea 3-2, finishing with a bronze medal. A really historic campaign, but after that, they never qualified again. Fact number 38. While Turkey has 1 medal, Uruguay has 2, and both are gold. With only 3 million inhabitants in an area roughly the size of Florida, Uruguay is the smallest country to ever win the title. In 1930, when their population was even smaller, they hosted a World Cup and won their first trophy. Then years later, in 1950, they won their 2nd title. To put it into perspective, the 2nd smallest country to win the title in terms of population size is Argentina, with a population 13 times larger than Uruguay. It's truly impressive. But Uruguay actually considers themselves 4-time champions. So much so that if you look at their badge, you'll see 4 stars. FIFA doesn't allow stars on the badge unless you're a world champion, but they make an exception for Uruguay. This because before the World Cup even existed, the first professional football tournaments were the 1924 and 1928 Olympics. Those were the biggest possible titles, and Uruguay won the gold medal twice. So FIFA allowed Uruguay to have 4 stars anyway. But Uruguay holds another record, which is the longest title drought. That takes us to fact number 40. By 2026, it'll have been 76 years since their last trophy. Now the 2nd country with the longest drought is England, that has been without lifting a trophy for 60 years. England has always been a football powerhouse, so this gap is actually surprising. Now the 3rd country with the longest drought is Brazil, which by 2026 will be 24 years without winning. If Brazil went as long without winning as England has, they wouldn't lift the trophy again until 2062. By then, Neymar would be 70 years old. England went so long without winning cause after winning the title, they lost the two semifinals they played, in 1990 and 2018. Now, if England struggles in semifinals, Argentina has 3 titles and 3 runners-up finishes, but no 3rd or 4th places. That is because they never lost a semifinal match. Believe it or not, in 1986, they defeated Belgium in the semifinal, in 1990, defeated Italy to reach the final, in 2014, defeated the Netherlands, and in 2022, defeated Croatia. I definitely don't want my country to face Argentina in a semifinal. And talking about Argentina, here's another fact that surprised me. The striker Mario Kempes is the only player to ever win the World Cup at home and also being the top scorer. In 1978, Argentina hosted the tournament, won the title, and the forward Mario Kempes scored 6 goals, more than anyone else. It was hosted in Argentina with Argentina as winners, with an Argentine coach and an Argentine top scorer. Believe it or not, this combination has never happened again. When France won the World Cup at home in 1998, the top scorer was Davor Suker from Croatia. Also in 1974, when Germany won the World Cup at home, the top scorer was Laco from Poland. So of course, Kempes also won the Player of the Tournament award. This award was actually given for the first time to Mario Kempes, but he never won it again. Then in 1986, the Best Player award went to Maradona. So in the following tournament, he had a chance to win it again, but it went to the Italian Salvatore Schillaci. Even Ronaldo, the R9, who won the award in 1998, didn't win again in 2002, despite being the top scorer. So the only player to win the Golden Ball twice is him, Lionel Messi, winning it in 2014 and 2022. In 2014, it was an award with no happiness at all, cause he lost the final. But in 2022, it came with a smile on his face, bringing the title back home to Argentina. But that trophy he carried off the plane was nothing more than a replica. That takes us to fact number 44. The World Cup has the most valuable trophy ever. It's made of 5 kilograms of 18 karat gold, valued at $400,000. It's so valuable that not even the champions get to keep it. It only leaves FIFA's headquarters for the World Cup ceremony, then it goes back. There is just one original trophy, just one. That means the trophy Messi kissed is the exact one Maradona lifted in 1986. Messi will never forget Qatar again, and Qatar itself broke records in that World Cup. One of them was being the smallest country to ever host a tournament, having an area of less than 12,000 square kilometers or 4,400 square miles. For comparison, Qatar could fit almost 15 times inside the US state of Florida, and is nearly 50 times smaller than France. The northernmost stadium was Al Bayt, and the distance from there to the farthest one, Al Janoub Stadium, was just a 45-minute drive. For fans who went to watch the World Cup, it was great. You could visit all stadiums in a single day. For comparison, the longest distance between two stadiums at the 2026 World Cup is a 50 hours drive, Vancouver to Mexico City. Now let's move to fact number 46. Qatar may be the smallest to host a World Cup, but it's not the smallest to ever play in the tournament. Qatar is indeed very small, but it's still twice as big as the country that played in the 2006 World Cup, Trinidad and Tobago. This Caribbean country next to Venezuela has only 5,100 square kilometers or 1,900 square miles. For comparison, this country could fit 107 times inside of France, 8 times inside of Switzerland, and 33 times smaller than Florida. And in 2006, they ended up in a group with Paraguay, Sweden, and England. It looked like they would be humiliated, but in their first match against Sweden, they managed to hold a draw. And if that was impressive, against England, they also held on. But that only lasted until the 83rd minute, when Peter Crouch scored with a header and Gerrard scored another one. It was a real cold shower. Then in the next game, they lost to Paraguay and were eliminated, finishing their World Cup with 1 draw, 2 defeats, and no goals scored. It's actually crazy, cause while Trinidad and Tobago, being so small, already played in a World Cup, their neighbors Venezuela has not. Venezuela at one point even reached 25th in the FIFA ranking, making them the best country to never play in the tournament. In the 2024 Copa America, Venezuela won all the group stage games and only lost on penalties to Canada. But when it comes to the World Cup qualifiers, they got unlucky. For 2010, they stayed just 2 points away from Intercontinental playoff. Then for 2014, they were just 5 points behind the qualification zone, and for the 2026 World Cup, they also missed the Intercontinental playoff by just 2 points. The thing is, in the South American qualifiers, Venezuela has to compete directly with teams like Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, Colombia, so things really get tough. Now, if Venezuela is the best team to never play in the tournament, Cuba is the lowest ranked country to play in a World Cup. Cuba is ranked as low as 160th in the FIFA ranking, but they have played in a World Cup before. This happened back in the 1930s, when for the 1938 World Cup, all North and Central American countries withdrew from the qualifiers, so Cuba was the only one, and even though they are weak today, in their World Cup they surprised everyone. The tournament started directly at the round of 16, and Cuba faced Romania. So it was a crazy game. Romania scored the opener, then Cuba turned it around, Romania scored again, and in extra time, both teams scored. So the match finished 3-3. But penalty shootouts didn't exist yet, so they had to play a second match, where they won by 2-1. Cuba reached the quarterfinals, but then in the next match, they lost 8-0 to Sweden. Nowadays, Cuba qualifying is nearly impossible. But if Cuba were in Oceania, they would definitely have a much better chance of going there again, cause Oceania has literally the easiest qualifiers. To put it in perspective, New Zealand qualified for the 2026 World Cup by playing only 5 matches, and their opponents were so weak that they scored 29 goals, more than 5 goals per game. They won 3-0 against Tahiti, 8-1 against Vanuatu, 8-0 against Samoa, 7-0 against Fiji, and 3-0 against New Caledonia. Facing these teams, they qualified for the World Cup. Before, they still had to play in an intercontinental playoff, but now they qualified directly. For context, the average FIFA ranking on New Zealand's opponents was 162nd place. Their luck is that Australia plays in Asia, so against the other Oceania countries, New Zealand basically becomes prime Brazil. But even having such an easy qualification path, New Zealand has already been one of the biggest surprises in World Cup history. In the 2010 World Cup, they arrived at the tournament ranked 78th in the FIFA ranking, but in the first match, they managed a draw against Slovakia. However, the most impressive moment came in the next game, when they faced Italy, the reigning world champions, and they scored the first goal of the match. Italy was desperate, until Quagliarella went down in the box and they won a penalty to finally equalize. Even so, New Zealand came away with a draw, against a team that was 5th in the FIFA ranking. Now they only needed to win against Paraguay to reach the round of 16, but this time New Zealand didn't manage to score, making it another draw. So with 3 draws in 3 matches, they finished 1 point behind Slovakia and were eliminated. New Zealand became the only country in that World Cup to not lose a single match, an impressive feat. That shows a low FIFA ranking doesn't mean a team is weak, and also being at the top doesn't guarantee success either, which brings us to fact number 51. There was a team that won the World Cup while being 18th in the FIFA ranking, and the country that did it was France. Yeah, they were so low because in the months leading to the 1998 World Cup, they tied with Norway, Sweden, Morocco, and even lost to Russia. They didn't look like a team that would host the World Cup a few months later. But when the tournament actually started, playing at home, they transformed. France reached the final and defeated Brazil 3-0. The favorites for that World Cup was Brazil, that was ranked 1st in the FIFA ranking, but they were defeated. And actually, the leader, the FIFA ranking, losing a World Cup is much more common than you think. There's always a lot of hype around the team that is ranked 1st, but the ranking started in the 1990s, and out of the 8 tournaments that have taken place since then, in 7 it was won by teams that were not in 1st place. In 1994, the champion Brazil was ranked 3rd, in 1998, the champion was ranked 18th, in 2006, Italy won while ranked 13th, and that pattern continued. In 2010, Spain was champion while ranked 2nd. In 2014, Germany was also 2nd. In 2018, France was 7th. And in 2022, Argentina entered the tournament ranked 3rd. The only exception was Brazil in 2002. So the lesson is clear: if you wanna win the World Cup, don't enter the tournament as the leader of the FIFA ranking. And speaking of winning the World Cup, Brazil is really the most successful team with 5 titles. But they also have a bad World Cup record, cause they are the country with the most red cards ever. When we think of red cards, we think of Argentina or the Netherlands. But Brazil is actually the one with the most players being sent off. It had 2 players sent off in 1938, 2 in 1954, and 1 in the 1962 semi-final, which was Garrincha. Keep in mind that players were sent off, but the object, the card itself, didn't exist yet. However, it didn't stop there. In 1974, one Brazilian was sent off against the Netherlands, another in 1990, and another one in 1994. That's already 8 sending offs. Then Ronaldinho was sent off in 2002 against England, Kaká in 2010 against the Ivory Coast, and Felipe Melo in the 2010 quarterfinals, making it 11 red cards. So since in the past the card itself didn't exist, it was finally introduced in the 1970 World Cup. But it was in 1974, in the match between Germany and Chile, that the first actual red card was shown. Chile's number 7 got the ball and right away he was tackled, but he clearly didn't like it, so he struck back with a kick to the leg. And it all happened right in front of the referee, so the ref simply sent him off. And in total, the 1974 World Cup had 5 red cards. That was low, but in 2022 it was even lower, having only 4 sending offs. And that's nothing compared to the number of players that were sent off in the 2006 World Cup. That tournament was crazy, with the first red card coming in the first round of the group stage, when a Trinidad and Tobago player made a terrible tackle on a Swedish guy. And that was actually one of the most peaceful games. Still in the group stage, the match between Italy and the US had 3 red cards, and Croatia vs Australia also had 3 reds. It was so crazy that there were 18 red cards in the group stage alone. But then it came the knockout stage, and if everyone thought things would calm down, in the round of 16, Portugal vs the Netherlands was a true battle, with 4 players being sent off, 2 from each team, making it the match with the most red cards in World Cup history. But the madness didn't stop there. At the same round, Materazzi was sent off against Australia, and Ghana's Jan was sent off against Brazil. Then in the quarterfinals, an Argentine player got a red card after penalties, and Wayne Rooney was sent off in the game against Portugal. To top it off, in extra time on the final, Zidane gave the historic headbutt and was sent off. In 2006 alone, there were more red cards than in the 2014, 2018 and 2022 World Cups combined, making it a total of 28 red cards. Now that's actually crazy. There were so many cards being shown that a player in that World Cup received 3 yellow cards in one match. Yeah, 2 yellow cards equal a red, so it should be impossible to get more than 2 yellow cards in one game, but it happened. In the group stage, Croatia faced Australia, where in the second half, the defender Simonic received his first yellow card in the match. Then in the 90th minute, he literally held the player back to prevent a counter-attack, receiving another yellow card. But instead of being sent off, everything continued as usual. Nobody seemed to notice. Then 3 minutes later, he committed another foul, so the referee gave him his 3rd yellow card and finally the red. I've never seen a player trying so hard to be sent off. So if Simonic holds the record for the most cards in a game, let's talk about the match with the most yellow cards, which was the so-called Lusail battle. Argentina vs the Netherlands in 2022. It was in the quarterfinals, and at first, it started like any other game. In the first 40 minutes, only Argentina's assistant coach had received the card. Then, starting from the 43rd minute, things started to heat up. Timber pushed an Argentine player and got a card, and Acuna also got a yellow for a foul on Timber. De Romero from Argentina touched the ball with his hand, earning a yellow card, and in the first half stoppage time, a Dutch bench player got a card. That was 4 cards in 5 minutes. People thought things would calm down at halftime, but there were even more coming. In the 76th minute, Dupay and Lisandro Martinez each received a yellow card. Argentina was leading 2-0, so things weren't too heated yet. But when the Netherlands scored, bringing them back into the game, it got really intense. Berghuis received the card, then Paredes committed a foul and kicked the ball toward the Dutch bench, causing a massive brawl, where both Paredes and the coach Scaloni were booked. It was chaos. Even Messi received a yellow card. And in the final minute, the Netherlands scored the equalizer. Then Otamendi received the yellow card immediately after, and in extra time, 2 more Argentine players received cards. Dumfries got 2 yellows in a row, resulting in a red, and then another Dutch player also got a yellow. Argentina eventually won on penalties, and this game went down in history with 18 yellow cards given, being officially a Guinness World Record. Argentina received so many cards that the player with the most yellow cards in history is also Argentine, the defender Javier Mascherano. He was a top-class defender, but he couldn't avoid being booked. In his first World Cup in 2006, he received 2 yellow cards. Then in South Africa, he got 2 more, in Brazil he got 1, and in Russia 2 more, becoming the most booked player with 7 yellow cards. But on the bright side, none of his cards were red. And for a player to be sent off, it has to be a tense match, and that usually happens from the middle towards the end of the game. But there was a guy who was sent off in less than 60 seconds. And believe it or not, it wasn't an Argentine. In the 1986 group stage, Scotland faced Uruguay. It was the last group stage match and Uruguay only needed a draw, while Scotland had to win. So Scotland pushed forward, and in just 50 seconds, the defender Batista made a terrible tackle. So the referee gave the red card in just 56 seconds. He didn't even have time to sweat. Then, even with a man up for the entire match, Scotland still couldn't beat Uruguay and got knocked out in the group stage. This brings us to fact number 60. Scotland is the country with the most appearances without ever getting past the group stage. Scotland has played in not 1, not 2, but 8 World Cups. Usually with that many tournaments, even a weaker team managed to reach the round of 16 at least once. But not Scotland. They were eliminated in the group stage 8 times. That's bad. But even though they always got knocked out in the group stage, Scotland was never the worst team of a World Cup edition. They always managed to give at least a bit of trouble. But which country actually had the worst World Cup campaign in history? Well, that record definitely belongs to South Korea. Today they're a team that plays well, but back in 1954 the story was completely different. That year, they went to the World Cup with no experience in a tournament, and they were unlucky enough to end in a group with that strong Hungary. So in the very first match against Hungary, the humiliation came. They conceded 4 goals in the first half and another 5 in the second, making it 9-0. And if that wasn't bad enough, in the next game against Turkey, they were thrashed again, this time by 7-0. The World Cup had a format where teams only played 2 group stage matches. So in just 2 games, South Korea conceded 16 goals, leaving the tournament with in fact the worst campaign ever. 9-0 in the World Cup is almost impossible to happen again, but believe it or not, that wasn't the biggest defeat ever. Years later, in 1982, Hungary showed up again and faced a team with a tiny El Salvador. Hungary wasn't as strong as before, but they still dominated, making it 3-0 in the first half. It seemed like just another win, until in the second half, Hungary scored 7 more goals. El Salvador managed to score a consolation goal, but the match ended in an incredible 10-1. In total, 11 goals were scored in that game. So it had everything to also be the match with the most goals in total. However, there was a match with even more goals. Back in 1954, Switzerland hosted the World Cup, and in the quarterfinals, they faced Austria in a match that became known as the Battle of Lausanne. Lausanne was the city where it happened, and Switzerland started strong, scoring 3 goals in the opening minutes. It looked like it was gonna be an easy win. But Austria fought back, scoring 5 goals to turn the game around. Switzerland didn't give up, scoring 1 more before halftime. Man, the game went into halftime at 5-4. The fans couldn't believe what they were seeing. Then in the second half, Austria scored again to make it 6-4. Switzerland pulled one back to 6-5. And then the Austrian striker scored another one, ending it 7-5 for Austria. An incredible 12 goals scored. Those goalkeepers deserve to be fired. But if Switzerland was eliminated conceding 7 goals in a single match, decades later they did the exact opposite, being eliminated without conceding a single goal. In 2006, in the World Cup hosted in Germany, they fell in a group with Togo, South Korea, and Zidane's France. Then in the first match against France, Switzerland managed to hold off the attack and finish the match 0-0. Then in the following game, they defeated Togo 2-0 and South Korea by 2-0 also. So they qualified to the round of 16, now to face Ukraine, where they managed to not concede any goal again. But they also didn't score, so the match went to penalties and Switzerland was eliminated. Just imagine being the only country to not concede a single goal but leaving with nothing. Switzerland lost on penalties, which is already bad enough. But there's a country that can be considered the worst when it comes to penalty shootouts. Spain, who's really bad at that. The first time they've ever faced a penalty shootout was in 1986 when they lost to Belgium. Then in the round of 16 in 2002, after winning the penalty shootout against Ireland, in the very next game they lost to South Korea. There was already 2 defeats out of 3, but it gets worse. In 2018 they faced Russia, where Koch and Aspas missed it, so Spain lost again. Finally, in the 2022 World Cup, Spain faced Morocco on penalties, where they definitely hit their rock bottom. Sarabia missed, Soler missed, and even Busquets missed. A winning percentage of just 20%. And a country that should teach Spain how to do penalties is Argentina, cause they are the exact opposite. The best team ever on penalty shootouts. If Spain has a 20% winning rate, Argentina has a winning rate much higher. And it's not just because of Messi. In the 1990 World Cup, Argentina defeated Yugoslavia and also defeated Italy on penalties. Then in 1998, they defeated England, making it 3 out of 3. So their next penalty shootout happened in 2006, where they were defeated. But from that moment on, Argentina turned into a beast in penalties. In 2014, they defeated the Netherlands in the semi-final. In 2022, they also defeated the Netherlands. And in the grand final against France, another win. In 7 penalty shootouts, Argentina won 6 of them, making it a winning percentage of literally 86%. If your country faces Argentina in a knockout match, you'd better hope it doesn't end in a draw. Now, if Messi helped Argentina by scoring penalty shootouts, it was also a penalty that made Ronaldo break a record, the only player to score in 5 World Cups. Playing in 5 World Cups is already very difficult, but scoring in each one of them is impossible, yet Ronaldo managed to achieve it. His first World Cup goal came in 2006, when he scored a penalty against Iran. Then in 2010, he scored against North Korea. In 2014, he scored against Ghana. In 2018, he scored a hat-trick against Spain. And finally, in 2022, he scored a penalty against Ghana. Messi doesn't have this record because he didn't score in the World Cup that took place in South Africa. So Ronaldo is the only one with this achievement. But it wasn't just Ronaldo who broke records for Portugal. In the round of 16 in 2022, Portugal faced Switzerland. And from a corner, Pepe scored with a header. That would have been just another goal if it wasn't for his age at the time, 39 years and 9 months, becoming the oldest player in history to score in a knockout match. And honestly, it's really hard to imagine anyone breaking this record. Now let's imagine that Portugal managed to reach the final. If that happened, Pepe would also play a final at 39 years old, but he still wouldn't be the oldest player to appear in a final. In 1982, Italy and Germany walked on the pitch to fight for the trophy. And in goal for Italy was Dino Zoff, at the age of 40 years. Yeah, 40 years old at a final. This guy was already a legend. He played in the 1970 World Cup, where Italy reached the final. He was also their goalkeeper in 1974, 1978, and again in 1982. And even at that age, he was still one of the best keepers in the world, also starring for Juventus. With all his huge experience, he was the captain and finished by lifting the trophy after a 3-1 victory over the Germans. Now, that team that lost to Italy was called West Germany. Not just Germany, West Germany. What happened is that after World War II, the country was divided into West and East, where each of them had their own national team. So this brings us to the next fact. In 1974, when West Germany hosted the World Cup, East Germany also qualified. But the crazy part is that they ended up being drawn into the same group. For the first time ever, it would be West versus East. The match took place at the Hamburg Stadium, where the Western side played in white and the Socialist side played in blue. Everyone knew that Beckenbauer's team, the one in white, was stronger, but the Socialist side gave everything they had and won by 1-0. Just imagine, it was a huge victory for them. It was celebrated a lot and even used as propaganda on their side of Germany. But in the end, Beckenbauer's team, the Western side, ended up lifting the trophy, while their neighbors finished in 6th place. And the coach of West Germany that won the title was Helmut Schön, a manager who holds a record all by himself. He's the coach with the most World Cup matches. Earlier, we talked about Pereira, who managed to go to 6 tournaments. But many times, his teams fell in the group stage, so he couldn't break the record held by Helmut Schön. This guy went to his first World Cup with Germany in 1966, where he reached the final. Then in 1970, he managed 6 more games, finishing 3rd, and in the following World Cup, he led Germany to the title. By then, he already had 19 World Cup games. But he was also Germany's manager in the next tournament, ending with a total of 25 matches. To this day, he's the only manager with that number of games. Now, if a German holds the record for the most matches, another German holds another record, the oldest coach at a World Cup. For comparison, the average age of the coaches at the tournament in Qatar was 55 years old, but in 2010, there was a manager at 71 years old. Most 70 years olds are retired, but this man was in a World Cup. not coaching Germany, but Greece. His name was also Zagallo, the same manager who led Greece to the 2004 UEFA Euro title, so he went on to manage Greece for years. But even as the most experienced coach in the tournament, in 2010 he had a poor campaign, getting knocked out in the group stage. And speaking of experienced coaches, there was another record at that World Cup, the oldest manager to win a title, and that was achieved by Spain's coach, Vicente del Bosque. This man had been working as a coach since the 1980s, won the Champions League with Real Madrid in the early 2000s, and he went to the World Cup in South Africa at 59 years old, almost 60. For comparison, he lifted a trophy at 15 years older than Argentina's Scaloni was when he won it in 2022. Later, he also went to the World Cup in Brazil at 63 and eventually retired at the age of 65. But if he was the oldest, let's go to the youngest coach to win the title. And Argentina's Scaloni really achieved something impressive. He retired as a player in 2015 and just 3 years later became the head coach for Argentina. Then at the Qatar World Cup, he led Argentina to the title at 44 years old. But even at that age, he was not the youngest coach to ever lift the trophy. Someone younger than him was Zagallo, who managed Brazil in 1970 at just 39 years old. That's remarkable. But there's someone even younger than him, and this happened years earlier. In 1930, in the first tournament, Uruguay won the trophy under the guidance of Alberto Sulpici, who was only 31 years old. This record will never be beaten. And the trophy that they won was this one, very different from the current trophy. That's because in the first 9 World Cups, the one given was called the Jules Rimet trophy, named after the FIFA president who created the tournament. And unlike today, where the winning team keeps a replica, back then the team who won kept the original trophy for 4 years and then had to return it to FIFA. And according to the rules, any team that won it 3 times would get to keep the trophy permanently. That's how, when Brazil won their 3rd title in 1970, they kept the Jules Rimet trophy, only for it to be stolen later. Yeah, in the 1980s, the original Jules Rimet trophy was stolen from the Brazilian national team headquarters and was never found again. But that wasn't the first time it was stolen. This brings us to the next fact. In the year 1966, a few months before the tournament that would be hosted in England, the original trophy was on public display and vanished. Everyone went crazy. England was about to host the tournament without the trophy. There was no replica or a substitute one, so they searched for days, until a week later, a dog sniffed out the trophy wrapped in newspaper, making that dog a national hero. A few months later, that same trophy was in the hands of the English captain, who lifted it at Wembley. Nowadays, no matter the tournament, the captains lift the trophy in the air. As you know, this is a standard celebration. But that wasn't something that happened in the past. Look at how the German captain held the trophy in 1954. He just held it like any other object, didn't lift it in the air. The same thing that Uruguay did when they became champions. That takes us to fact number 77. The act of lifting the trophy during celebrations started at the World Cup. In 1958, when Brazil won the title, photographers asked the Brazilian captain to lift it for a better photo of the trophy. That's when he lifted it, creating that gesture that all captains after him copied, and starting a trend that spread to all competitions. And Brazil became champions in 58 with an incredible attack of Pelé and Garrincha. But even though Brazil won that trophy, the team that actually scored the most goals was France. That's a bizarre fact, because in the 14 out of the 22 World Cups held, the team that scored the most goals didn't win the tournament. 14 out of 22. Right in the 1930 World Cup, the champion was Uruguay, but Argentina scored the most goals. It all started from the very first edition. More recently, in 2006, Germany scored the most goals but didn't lift the trophy. In 2010, Germany scored the most goals again but ended up with the bronze. In 2018, the team with the most goals was Belgium, and in 2022, it was France. Even the team that set the record for the most goals in a single edition didn't win the trophy. That was Hungary in 1954, who scored 27 goals but ended up as runners-up. And that World Cup where Hungary scored 27 goals was the tournament with the most goals per match. But we've already seen that. Now there's a World Cup that set a record in the opposite way. The lowest average goals per game. Italy 1990. If the Italians are famous for their solid defense, this World Cup brought it. In one of the groups, which had England and the Netherlands, only 7 goals were scored across all group matches. Then in the knockout stage, there were many goalless draws or 1-0 wins. So this World Cup went down in history as the one with the fewest goals per game, an average of 2.2. At the same time, the 1990 World Cup had an attendance of 2.5 million across all matches, an average of 48,000 per game, setting the record for the one with the highest attendance in history. But this record didn't last long, because the next World Cup in the USA became the tournament with the highest attendance of all time, a total of 3.5 million people, an average of 69,000 per game. But this record is about to be broken in the 2026 World Cup. I can't wait to see it. So what did you think of this video? If you enjoyed it, I think you're gonna like this one too. Thanks for watching and bye!